It's not like the movies, you know? There wasn't some single moment where everything came crashing down. No big dramatic reveal. It started small, little things that you try to ignore at first because you don't want to sound paranoid. But damn if those things don't add up over time. And before you know it, the woman you married starts to feel like a stranger living in your house. That's exactly how it began for me with Talia. She was packing for a work trip when I first felt the crack. Talia stood in front of the bed, tossing clothes into her suitcase like she was late for a flight, her back turned to me the whole time. At first, I didn't pay much attention. She traveled for work often enough. But this time was different. I noticed the outfits. Short dresses, skimpy tops. Clothes that made her look damn good, I won't lie, but they weren't things she ever wore on these trips. And then, the perfume. The one I bought her for our anniversary last year. Expensive as hell, and something she only used on special nights, usually for me. You really need all that for a work thing? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She didn't look at me. It's just a few dinners with clients. You know how it is. Except I didn't know. Not like this. I wasn't dumb. Something was off. I mean, what kind of client dinner requires lingerie and perfume that screams, "Come fuck me"? And then there was the necklace. The one I gave her on our last anniversary. A simple gold chain with a tiny heart pendant. She slipped it into the suitcase as if it was some afterthought, like she knew she had to take it but didn't really want to. That one cut a little deeper than I expected. It felt more like a box-ticking gesture than anything sentimental. Need any help? I asked, hoping to catch her eye. No, I got it, she replied, zipping the suitcase shut and walking out of the room before I could say anything else. Our relationship had already been rocky the past few weeks, and that trip felt like another nail in the coffin. We argued over stupid things, whether I was helping around the house enough, why she seemed distracted all the time, whether I'd forgotten to pick up dry cleaning. Normal couple stuff on the surface, but beneath that it felt like we were falling apart, piece by piece. It wasn't just the arguments, though. Talia had been pulling away from me in ways that were hard to ignore. She started coming home later than usual, always with the same excuse. Work's been crazy. And when she did get home, she acted exhausted, crashing on the couch with her phone glued to her hand. I'd ask about her day, and she'd mumble half-hearted answers. As if I was some coworker, she had a humor rather than the man she married. The worst part? The intimacy was gone. I mean, completely gone. It wasn't just that we weren't having sex. It was the way she avoided me, sidestepping kisses, brushing off hugs. Whenever I tried to get close, she'd stiffen or say she was tired. Once, when I tried to initiate something after a nice dinner, she gave me this look, half annoyance, half pity, and said, "Harris, not now, okay? I have an early day tomorrow." I stood there, feeling like some pathetic loser who'd asked for a dance and got rejected in front of the whole school. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering when everything had gone so wrong. I thought back to our early days, back when just the sight of her would light me up inside. We used to laugh a lot, touch each other constantly, like we couldn't get enough. But now it felt like I was living with a polite stranger. A few nights later, I met up with Mason at our usual bar. Mason and I had been friends since college, and he was the kind of guy you could talk to about anything without feeling judged. We were playing pool, knocking back whiskey, and I figured I'd unload some of what was eating at me. "She's been acting weird, man," I said, lining up a shot. Like distant, and not in the usual "I'm busy" kind of way. I mean really distant. Mason chalked his cue stick and gave me a look. "Rough patches happen, dude. Maybe she's just stressed with work." "Yeah, but she changed her phone password," I added, sinking the 8-ball. That made him pause. "She tell you why?" "No." He didn't say anything for a moment, just took a long drink. "Look, marriages go through stuff. I'm not saying anything's happening, but that's not exactly a good sign, man. And that's the thing. Mason wasn't one to jump to conclusions. If even he was hesitating, I knew I wasn't imagining things. When I got home that night, Talia was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. I lay there next to her, staring at the curve of her back, the way her hair spread across the pillow. I wanted to reach out, to touch her, to feel some sort of connection, but the space between us felt miles wide. The next morning, she left early for her trip, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek before she went out the door. It was the kind of kiss you'd give a relative at Thanksgiving, not the kind of kiss you give your husband. I watched her walk away, And something in me knew that when she came back, things wouldn't be the same. Not that they were even the same before. All day, I kept replaying moments in my head, looking for signs I might have missed. The times she'd cancel plans last minute. The nights she wouldn't pick up her phone, saying later she was too tired to answer. It's easy to write off stuff like that when you trust someone, but once doubt creeps in, it eats at you. I kept telling myself that I'd confront her when she got back, but deep down, I already knew something was broken, and there was no putting it back together. It happened by accident, like a punch you don't see coming. One morning, I grabbed our shared tablet, same as always, just planning to skim the news with my coffee. I wasn't looking for anything suspicious. Hell, the thought hadn't even crossed my mind. But when the screen lit up, I noticed something strange. The tablet had synced with Talia's phone. Her messages, photos, and emails, all sitting there in plain view. At first, I didn't mean to snoop. I swear. But then my eyes caught a notification for a hotel bill. My stomach flipped as I opened the email. It wasn't just any bill. This one listed dinner for two with champagne, dessert, and fancy cocktails. My hands started to shake. I scrolled down and saw the name of the hotel, a five-star place downtown. And right there, attached to the receipt, was a note. Thank you for choosing us for your romantic getaway. Romantic getaway. What the fuck? I wish I could say I slammed the tablet shut and walked away. But I didn't. I couldn't. My fingers hovered over her synced photo gallery. And when I opened it, I felt my world cave in. There they were, selfies of Talia in lingerie I'd never seen before. Sexy, revealing poses she never took for me. I knew right away those pictures weren't meant for my eyes. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. I kept scrolling through the gallery, hoping there'd be an explanation, a reason that made this all make sense. But every swipe just made it worse. The angles, the way she posed, the way she smiled, it wasn't just for fun. This was for someone. Someone who wasn't me. I called her immediately. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I must have tried a dozen times, pacing around the kitchen like a caged animal. When she finally texted me back, all she said was, busy with work. Can't talk now. That was it. No apology for missing my calls, no explanation, nothing. Just more bullshit. I sat down at the table, the tablet still open in front of me, and tried to hold it together. But I could feel the anger boiling in my chest, a deep, ugly rage that threatened to swallow me whole. I went back to the photos, scrolling through them again and again, as if looking at them enough times would make them hurt less. It didn't. It only made me sicker. The messages were the next thing I checked. I don't know why I put myself through it. Maybe I thought if I saw the whole picture, it'd somehow hurt less. Instead, it felt like being stabbed over and over. One name kept showing up. Ashton. Some guy I didn't know. Someone who'd never come up in our conversations. The messages weren't long, but they were enough to shatter whatever hope I had left. Flirty texts, inside jokes, mentions of drinks, late-night plans, and hotel rooms. And then, the one message that confirmed everything. Can't wait to see you again. Same room as last time. I just sat there, staring at the screen, my head pounding, heart racing. That was it. My worst fear was right there in black and white. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning to see him again. I thought I'd be furious, but all I felt in that moment was numb. Cold, dead numb. Like part of me had already known this was coming, and the rest of me had just caught up. For a while, I just sat there in the silence of the kitchen, clutching the tablet, trying to hold back the tears that were burning behind my eyes. I didn't cry often. Hell, I can't even remember the last time I did. But this was different. This wasn't just betrayal. It was the death of everything I thought we had. Every kiss, every memory, every promise. It all felt like a goddamn lie. I kept staring at her text with Ashton, my mind spiraling with questions. How long had it been going on? Was it just him? Or were there others? When had she stopped loving me, if she ever loved me at all? The thing that hurt the most was knowing she'd never even given me a chance to fight for us. She just checked out, found someone else, and left me in the dark. The tablet buzzed in my hand, a new message. It was from Talia. We'll talk when I get back, okay? Don't stress. Don't stress. I almost laughed at how fucking absurd that was. Don't stress? After everything I just found? She didn't even try to deny it. No attempt to explain herself, no panic, no remorse. Just a half-assed text telling me not to worry. Like I was some idiot who'd wait patiently until she got back from fucking another man. I set the tablet down, my hands shaking with a rage I didn't know I had in me. Every part of me wanted to smash it against the wall, to scream, to throw something, anything. But I didn't. I just sat there, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to process the fact that the woman I'd built my life around, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone else, was nothing more than a fucking liar. Eventually, I stood up, pacing around the house, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. Do I confront her now? Call her and let her hear the anger in my voice? Or do I wait? Wait for her to come home and look me in the eye, so I can watch her squirm under the weight of her lies? I knew one thing for sure. There was no going back from this. Whatever we had, it was gone. She'd killed it the second she sent those pictures. The second she decided someone else was worth more than the life we'd built together. And the thing that scared me the most wasn't the thought of losing her. It was the thought that maybe, just maybe, I'd never really known her at all. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, going over every moment we'd shared, trying to find the cracks I must have missed along the way. And the more I thought about it, the more it all made sense. The late nights, the canceled plans, the coldness between us. I tried to convince myself it was just a phase, that we'd get through it. But now I knew better. There was no fixing this. There never was. I poured myself a drink, sat down on the couch, and stared at the tablet one more time. The messages with Ashton were still open, taunting me, daring me to do something about them. My hands clenched in a fist as I thought about that smug son of a bitch, knowing he'd been with my wife, while I sat at home like a fool, waiting for her to come back to me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. And I sure as hell wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover. Not from alcohol, but from the emotional storm I'd been drowning in all night. My eyes burned, my chest felt tight, and every breath felt heavy. I knew I couldn't keep this bottled up any longer, so I called Mason. If there was anyone I could trust to give me advice without sugarcoating it, it was him. We agreed to meet at the bar where we always hung out, and I threw on whatever clothes I could find, not giving a damn about how I looked. When I got there, Mason was already waiting at a corner table, nursing a beer. His expression changed the moment he saw my face, concern mixed with curiosity, as if he could tell something big had happened. I didn't waste time with small talk. I slid the tablet across the table and watched as his eyes scanned the screen. Jesus, man, he muttered, swiping through the photos and reading the messages. This is bad. He shook his head, clearly uncomfortable. Mason wasn't the type to get easily rattled, but I could see the disbelief on his face. I leaned back in my chair, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. What the fuck do I do, Mason? Walk away? Let her get away with it. He sighed, setting the tablet down. You've got two options, Harris. First, you can walk. Get a lawyer. Cut your losses and move on. It'll hurt, but you'll have your dignity intact. I shook my head. That's not enough. Not after what she's done. Mason gave me a knowing look. Then there's option two. You hurt her back. Hit her where it hurts the most. Make her feel everything you're feeling right now. I stared at him, my mind swirling. Part of me wanted to be the bigger person, to walk away and let karma take care of it. But the other part, the part that had spent hours staring at those photos, reliving every lie, wanted blood. I wasn't proud of that part, but it was there, gnawing at me. After what felt like an eternity, I made my decision. I want her to feel it, I said quietly. I want her to know exactly what it's like. Mason nodded, as if he'd been expecting that answer all along. Then you know what you gotta do. On the way home, the plan started forming in my mind. Something dark, something calculated. I wasn't just going to confront her. That would be too easy. No, I wanted her to feel the betrayal, to experience the same gut-wrenching pain I did. And I knew exactly who to use to make it happen. Rachel Hudson. Rachel had been Talia's friend for years, but the two of them hadn't been as close lately. Rachel always had a bit of a thing for me. Harmless flirting when Talia wasn't looking, lingering glances that didn't mean much at the time. But now those little moments felt like an opportunity. I didn't have to convince myself too hard that Rachel would be more than willing to help. She'd always wanted a piece of me, and I was ready to give it to her, at least for one night. I found her number in my contacts and shot her a text. "Hey Rachel, been thinking about you. Want to grab dinner sometime?" It didn't take long for her to respond. "I thought you'd never ask when." I smiled, though it wasn't a happy one. "Tomorrow night? My place?" Her reply came almost instantly. "I'm in. Can't wait." With that, the wheels were in motion. I had no intention of stopping now. The next day, I spent hours preparing the house. I bought candles, dozens of them, and flowers, making the place look like a scene out of some romantic movie. I set the table with our nicest dishes, poured wine, and dimmed the lights just enough to make everything feel warm and intimate. From the outside, it looked like the perfect setup for reconciliation, like a man trying to win back his wife. But inside, I was setting the stage for her worst nightmare. I went upstairs to the bedroom, double-checking everything. The bed was made, the sheets fresh, and the room smelled like lavender, the way Talia liked it. I placed a couple of wine glasses on the nightstand, just for effect, and dimmed the lights in there too. It was all part of the show, a carefully crafted illusion. By the time everything was ready, the house looked flawless. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking it all in, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. This was going to hurt her. I knew that, but the thought didn't make me feel guilty. If anything, it made me feel in control again. For the first time since I found those messages, I felt like I had the upper hand. As I stood there, I couldn't help but think about the irony of it all. I was about to use romance, something sacred in a marriage, as a weapon. I didn't just want to hurt Talia. I wanted to break her the way she'd broken me. Tomorrow night, Rachel would come over, and everything would fall into place. Talia wouldn't see it coming. And when she did, it would be too late. Talia came through the door late that night, dragging her suitcase behind her. I heard the keys jingle as she fumbled with the lock, and when she finally stepped inside, she looked content. Tired, sure, but not the kind of tired that comes from a long day at work. No, this was the kind of tired that comes after having a little too much fun. Her eyes were a little glazed, her hair slightly messy, and there was a relaxed ease to her movements. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed she was just happy to be home. But I did know better. "Hey, babe," I said, meeting her at the door with a warm smile, a glass of wine already in hand. "You look like you could use this." She blinked at me, clearly surprised by my friendliness. She wasn't expecting this, not after the tension we'd had before she left. But I saw it in her eyes. Relief. That tiny flicker of belief that maybe, just maybe, I didn't know. Maybe her secret was still safe. "Thanks," she said, taking the wine and sipping it slowly. "I missed you." I smiled at that, even though it made my stomach churn. "I bet you did," I thought, but I didn't let the bitterness show. I just kept smiling, pretending everything was normal. "I missed you too," I said softly, and the lie rolled off my tongue with ease. She gave me a small smile, and for a second it almost felt like old times. Almost. I could see her relaxing, the tension in her shoulders easing as she slipped off her shoes and set her suitcase by the door. Whatever guilt she might have felt was fading fast, replaced by the comfort of thinking she'd gotten away with it. "Dinner's ready," I said, gesturing toward the dining room. "I thought we could have a little date night, you know? Just us." She looked genuinely touched by that, which pissed me off even more. How easy it was for her to slip back into this, to play the role of the loving wife after spending nights in someone else's bed. But I kept my cool. Tonight wasn't about my anger. It was about her, and making sure she felt every ounce of betrayal I'd been carrying. At the table, I poured more wine and served the meal I'd prepared earlier. I kept the conversation light, asking about her trip, pretending to be interested in her answers. She talked about meetings and presentations, filling in details like a seasoned liar, but I nodded along as if every word made perfect sense. "So, how were the client dinners?" I asked, swirling the wine in my glass. She hesitated for half a second, just enough for me to notice. "They were good. Productive." "Good," I said, smiling warmly. "I'm glad." She studied me for a moment, as if trying to figure out what had changed. I could see the wheels turning in her head, But whatever doubts she had were quickly buried under the illusion I'd carefully created. By the time we finished eating, she was fully relaxed, even leaning across the table to brush my hand with hers, like things between us were finally back on track. It almost made me laugh. How easy it was to lull her into a false sense of security. She thought she was safe. She thought we were good again. But the night was far from over. When we finished dinner, I stood up and took her hand. "Come on," I said. "Let's go upstairs." She smiled, looking pleasantly surprised. "You sure? You're not tired?" "Not at all," I said, my tone light and easy. "I've been waiting for this." She followed me upstairs, her guard completely down. I could feel the tension shift as we climbed the steps, her hand warm in mine. In her mind, this was the beginning of a reconciliation, the start of something new. I could almost hear her thinking, maybe things can go back to the way they were. When we reached the bedroom door, I let her go ahead. "After you," I said, leaning casually against the doorframe. Talia pushed the door open and froze. There, lying comfortably in the middle of our bed, was Rachel. She was wearing nothing but a silk robe, her legs stretched out, and that smug, knowing smile spread across her lips. "Hey, Talia," Rachel said sweetly, her voice dripping with amusement. "Miss me?" I watched the color drain from Talia's face as the realization hit her. It was almost poetic, the way her expression shifted. First confusion, then shock, and finally horror. "What the?" Talia stammered, her eyes darting between me and Rachel. "What the fuck is this?" I crossed my arms, enjoying the moment far more than I should have. "Now you know how it feels," I said, my voice calm and measured. She stared at me, her face pale, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words but couldn't. "Harris, what the fuck is going on?" I gave her a cold smile. "What's the matter, Talia? I thought you liked surprises." Rachel chuckled softly, adjusting her position on the bed, clearly enjoying every second of Talia's meltdown. You're fucking insane," Talia spat, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You brought her into our bed? Into your bed?" I shot back, raising an eyebrow. "Funny. I thought this bed lost its meaning the moment you decided to share yourself with Ashton." Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment, I saw genuine fear flicker across her face. That's when it hit her. She knew. She knew I had found out everything. "I can explain," she started, her voice shaky, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Don't," I said flatly. "I've heard enough lies." Talia looked between me and Rachel, her hands trembling at her sides. "Harris, please, this isn't—" "Save it." I cut her off, my tone sharp. "This is exactly what it looks like. Now, you get to know what it feels like to be betrayed." Rachel stood up slowly, stretching like a cat, clearly in no rush to leave. "Well, this was fun," she said with a smirk, grabbing her clothes off the floor. "Thanks for the invite." I didn't say a word as she sauntered past Talia, brushing against her shoulder as she left. The look on Talia's face was priceless. Pure devastation mixed with disbelief. When Rachel was gone, Talia rounded on me, her anger finally boiling over. "You bastard," she hissed. "How could you do this to me?" I tilted my head, giving her the same look she'd given me so many times before. "How could I? How could you?" She stood there, breathing hard, her fists clenched, tears welling up in her eyes. But there was no sympathy left in me. Not anymore. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her crumble under the weight of everything she'd done. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something close to peace. Talia's face twisted with rage, and the silence between us shattered like glass. She launched into a tirade, her voice raw and sharp, cutting through the room like a knife. "You fucking asshole," she screamed, her hands balled into fists. "How dare you bring that bitch into our bed? How fucking dare you?" I stood there, calm as ever, arms crossed, watching her unravel. It was almost surreal seeing her like this, like I'd yanked the mask off her face and finally revealed the person beneath. The rage, the panic, the betrayal written all over her features. The irony of it almost made me laugh. "You did this to me?" she shouted, her voice cracking, desperate to twist the knife in reverse. "After everything, You do this? I leaned against the wall, giving her the coldest look I could muster. Now you know how it feels, I said, my voice steady. That hit her like a brick to the face. Her mouth opened as if she wanted to argue, but no words came out. I could see the moment it sank in, the weight of what she had done, now staring her right in the eye. She stumbled back a step, as if I had physically struck her. Her whole body trembled, and her face went pale. You don't understand, Harris, she stammered, her voice dropping from fury to something close to pleading. It wasn't what you think. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake. Just one stupid, drunken night. She was grasping at straws now, throwing out whatever she thought might save her. The words spilled out in a messy, desperate stream, each one reeking of bullshit. I didn't want to hurt you, she continued, tears pooling in her eyes. It was never supposed to be anything serious. I had just happened. I was drunk, and I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't even know what I was doing. I stared at her, unblinking. Her excuses were like static in the background, noise I had no interest in listening to. She sounded like a teenager caught sneaking out past curfew, not a woman explaining away a betrayal that shattered her marriage. You didn't mean for it to happen? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. So what? Ashton just accidentally ended up between your legs? Her face flushed with shame, and she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I swear, Harris, she whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. It didn't mean anything. I was confused, lonely. We were in such a bad place. And Stop. I cut her off, my voice as cold as steel. Just stop. She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, like she was hoping there was still a chance I might forgive her. But I didn't feel pity. Not an ounce. Before she could say anything else, Rachel stirred from the bed, stretching lazily, completely unbothered by the chaos unfolding in front of her. Well, Rachel said with a smirk, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. That was entertaining. Talia turned to her, glaring with pure venom. Get the fuck out of my house. Rachel took her time slipping on her clothes, savoring the moment like she was enjoying a fine glass of wine. She adjusted her robe, tied it loosely around her waist, and stood up, completely unhurried. Relax, Talia, Rachel said, flashing a smug grin. I was just doing what you couldn't. Keeping your husband company. I didn't say a word, didn't move a muscle. I just stood there, watching the scene unfold, knowing this was exactly what I had planned. Rachel gave me a wink as she strolled toward the door. As she passed Talia, she leaned in just enough to whisper, loud enough for me to hear. Guess what, Talia? He's not even that good of a husband. Talia stood frozen, her jaw clenched so tight, I thought she might crack her teeth. But she didn't say anything, not to Rachel, not to me. She just stood there, devastated, broken in a way I knew all too well. Rachel made her way to the door, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. She looked over her shoulder one last time, giving me a satisfied smile. Thanks for the invite, Harris, she said with a wink. I gave her a nod, and with that, she was gone, leaving Talia and me alone in the wreckage. The moment the door clicked shut, Talia turned back to me, her expression a tangled mess of fury, shame, and disbelief. Her breath hitched, and I could see the cracks spreading wider in her carefully constructed facade. How could you do this to me? She whispered, her voice hollow, as if the betrayal had physically hollowed her out. I let the silence hang between us, heavy and suffocating, before answering. How could I not? The morning after everything came crashing down, I woke up before the sun, lying in a bed that felt colder than ever. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, thinking about what needed to happen next. There was no going back now. What was left between Talia and me was beyond repair, and I wasn't about to stick around pretending otherwise. I got out of bed, careful not to wake her, and went downstairs. The air in the house felt heavy, like the aftermath of a storm. I found her suitcase where she'd left it by the door and carried it to the kitchen. I opened it and started packing her clothes, carefully, deliberately. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage from the night before had burned out, leaving only a strange sense of clarity. I was done. By the time the sun began to rise, Her suitcase was packed and zipped shut, sitting neatly by the front door. I made a pot of coffee and poured myself a mug, savoring the quiet for a moment. Then I sat down at the table and waited. It wasn't long before I heard her footsteps on the stairs, soft and hesitant. She probably thought we'd talk it out, that I'd still be furious, but maybe she could say the right thing and make me stay. I could almost picture the conversation she had rehearsed in her mind all night. She came into the room slowly, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Harris," she started, her voice fragile, like the cracks in a glass about to shatter. I didn't give her the chance to finish. "Your suitcase is by the door," I said evenly, nodding toward it. "I've already packed your things." She blinked, confused, as if she couldn't process what was happening. What are you saying?" "I filed for divorce this morning," I said, my tone flat and final. "It's over, Talia." Her face crumpled, the weight of my words hitting her like a punch to the chest. "No, Harris, please. Don't do this. We can work through this. We can fix it." I shook my head slowly. "No, we can't. It's too late." She rushed toward me, her hands grabbing at my arms, her tears falling freely now. "Please, Harris, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I'll do anything to make it right. Just don't leave me." Her words were desperate, full of promises that meant nothing now. I looked down at her, seeing her for what she really was. Not the woman I had once loved, but a stranger who had destroyed everything we had built together. "It's too late," I repeated, my voice cold and steady. She sobbed harder, clinging to me like a drowning woman grasping at anything to keep her afloat. But I didn't waver. There was no room left for forgiveness, no second chances, no turning back. I gently pulled her hands off me and stepped back. "You need to leave." Her face twisted in agony, but she knew there was nothing left to say. She turned toward the door, dragging her suitcase behind her with shaking hands. For a moment, she paused, as if hoping I might call her back, offer her one last chance to make things right. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching as she opened the door and stepped out into the morning light. And just like that, she was gone. The silence that followed was deafening, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like relief, like I could finally breathe again after holding my breath for far too long. I poured myself another cup of coffee and carried it out to the terrace, the cool morning breeze brushing against my skin. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange as the sun began to rise, spilling light over the horizon. I sat down in my usual spot, cradling the warm mug between my hands, and watched the world slowly come to life. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt at peace. There was still pain, still the sting of betrayal lingering in the back of my mind, but it didn't consume me anymore. I knew it would take time to heal, but I also knew I was finally free. No more lies. No more games. No more pretending. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk, and that was enough. I took a sip of coffee, savoring the moment, and let the past slip away with the rising sun. Whatever came next, I would face it head on, without fear or regret. And this time, I would do it alone,